New edition of Celtics Beat. I am Adam Kaufman, Evan Valenti, our producer, sometimes host, here with us as always, and joined by a good friend of the program, Mark Murphy of the Boston Herald. And Mark,
Yes.
last time you were on, you watched some of the show back on YouTube or on social media, wherever. We're everywhere. We float around, and what you texted me was, no one told me I was going to look like, your grandpa
Yeah,
on this show. Well,
yeah.
Gramps, it's good to have you back on the program.
Hey, thanks. My daughter's about to get married. I guess I'm going to be eligible soon. So.
It's a part of life that we all need to not only accept but celebrate. I think that growing old has a stigma to it, Mark. That you know what, I'm not here for it because it sure as hell beats the alternative, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, once I leave this, I'll go live like they do in Nomad Land, out of a trailer somewhere.
Well, they'll keep you on the beat as long as possible. Then,
All right.
how are you guys doing? I'm not great, if I'm being honest with you.
No,
I'm not at all surprised by what we've seen so far in this Nets series.
no,
And for anyone that
no.
is unaware, although I can't imagine you are because you wouldn't be listening to this show, Brooklyn took the first two games in Brooklyn. The
Right,
series now shifts to Boston. Obviously, Game 3
right,
coming up on Friday, which is
right.
tomorrow as we record, and then Game 4 on Sunday with what expects to be a packed house at the Garden. But Celtics, I would be disingenuous to say they put a scare into the Nets in the first half of Game 1. I think it was maybe something more
Uh,
of a wake-up call for Brooklyn, trailing by a handful at the half. From
I,
there, they just started hitting shots. They ran away, and
yeah,
as we know,
yeah,
Game 2 was just really ugly from the start. But this is
yeah.
this is what we expected. This is what people were rooting for against the Wizards in the play-in game, to have the opportunity, Mark, to see this, and it's not
Right.
fun.
No, no, it's been horrible. Uh, you talk about the first half of game one. I think on both sides, it was for 5 minutes planted in their heads. Well, this could actually get even closer. And then the Nets, who are not known as a good defensive team, came out and just completely took Jayson Tatum out of it. And they didn't get enough cutters. They didn't get any kind of ball movement, and they just sank. Yeah,
It's really
and then the defensive issues. I I had written before the series started that Joe Harris was going to be the big beneficiary here because you know a 3-point champion who's on a team where all he has to do is take open 3 pointers. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Well, we sure as hell saw that at the start of Game 2 when he just went crazy in that first quarter, kind of
Yeah,
coasted from there. He didn't have to do anything else. You
right.
have that three-headed monster, as we know: Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and there were a lot of. We talked about it with Mike Gorman last week. We've talked about it with Ian Thompson on the show. The questions going into the series of, okay, well, maybe, just maybe, if there's any, not that anyone thought the Celtics were going to win this series, but let's say, in a perfect world, to some anyway, you steal two games. And I
Right.
had Nets in 5. I never thought 2 was all that possible. And now as we talk, it's looking like even 1 isn't all that
Yeah.
plausible. But
Yeah.
you know, people said that this is, if you want to catch the Nets, now is the time to at least take advantage of the lack of
Right.
continuity, the fact that
Right.
those guys, the big 3, had only played 8 games together going into this
Yeah.
series over the course of this season, between injuries and
Yeah.
everything else that was involved there in Brooklyn over the course of the
Yeah.
year. And nope, doesn't seem to
No.
matter all that much. This this
No.
team is the real deal.
I think the problem is that you've got three guys in Durant, Harden, and Kyrie who are also great ISO players. So so what if they don't move the ball? I mean, they're all going to score anyway. It's that kind of an offense. It's really going to be interesting to see how a team handles them down the road, like Philly, for example.
Mm.
If that would be a great series. Because I don't think the Nets have anything to deal with Joel Embiid, and you know that gives Philly a chance. But otherwise, I don't see who beats this team.
Yeah,
Let's
look, I'll go right now here. Like, I don't see anybody with the way that the Nets are currently playing who's just going to beat them. I mean, maybe Milwaukee because they have Giannis and Drew can handle Kyrie a little bit. But that one piece, that Joe Harris piece, I had people asking me about, what would you do defensively on the Nets? And I'm like, again, I'm not nearly qualified enough to answer this question. But like, they have so many different guys. Then all of a sudden you have Joe Harris running off screens, running through, different, obstacles. And all of a sudden he's open for three and there's nothing you can really do about it. I mean, look at the defense they play for, a good 3/4 of possession. They're good. And then all of a sudden there's Joe Harris wide open. You're like, well, what, it's a math problem the Celtics can't solve right now. And like, look, Adam was very adamant, has been adamant on text message with me. We should have lost the game to the Wizards, and they should have been aiming to play Philadelphia. I have a hard time rooting for a loss.
We're aiming for the lottery.
Yeah, I just don't feel like comfortable doing that. I'd rather see this team play with some conviction,
right,
and at least enter the playoffs on a nice note. And I think they did. That was a great effort game. But they've run into a buzzsaw here. This Nets team is unbelievable. It's one of the most efficient offenses in NBA history. But one thing I'll say though, Mark, as like a spin zone, let's make a positive out of this thing, is it'll give Danny and the rest of the front office crew there and the coaching staff and the players as well. Like, this is what you're up against right here. This team and getting blown out in the first two games shows you there's a long way to go here. This team isn't like a flash in the pan and going to be done. This Nets team is now the team you need to chase, at least in your own conference. Who cares about the West right now? I mean, we'll see what happens with Golden State. We'll see what happens with the Lakers. We'll see what happens with the Mavs, et cetera, et cetera. But inside your own conference, this Nets team, as we all said months ago, is the team to beat. They will continue to be the team to beat until those three guys aren't in the same team anymore. So the one thing I'll say, Mark, and maybe you disagree with this, is the idea of at least we know what we're up against now, and at least we know we need to become drastically better to compete with this team. And obviously, adding a healthy Jaylen Brown will help this, but there's a big gap between these two teams right now.
No, and I think, you need a trade of some kind. I hate to say it because I think he's just a terrific player, but I think Marcus Smart is the piece to go. And then, it looked like he had value around the trade deadline. It sounded like there were teams phoning in, but that might be what you have to do. And
you know what's funny about that though? This series reminds me. I don't know if you guys remember that series a couple of years ago where the Celtics undermanned, played a Cleveland squad, and Marcus Smart shot the lights out to steal a game, and that was it. It feels very similar here, where they're undermanned, they're banged. It's pretty obvious they're banged up too, and it's going to take some ridiculous effort to try and keep this team afloat here in one game. It might take a Marcus Smart heat check. It might be an Evan Fournier heat check game where they steal one, but they're just way overmatched. There's no answer here. There's no answer.
It'll be interesting to see how much the crowd gets them close, because I think they desperately need their own crowd right now. And maybe that sorry for my throat, guys. Maybe
I just wish we were in person. I feel I wish there, like, if I can't give you like a virtual Heimlich, I want to reach in to save you. I want to help out. I can't do it from here.
So Marcus, he had his big game the last game, right? So can he do that 2 games in a row? That you need somebody to offset Tatum. I mean, Fournier looks like he's close. Kemba is back to being indecisive Kemba. I just don't see it.
Guys, this is the most, there are so many different things I want to talk about. This is the most alarming statement I feel like I could make about the first 2 games of this series for the Celtics. Your leading scorer right now through 2 games is Marcus Smart. That's a problem. That's a gigantic problem because that's
Yeah.
not a guy you should even be turning to for offense in a grand way. Like, yes, can he have the Kelly Olynyk game or the Marcus Smart game as has happened in the past? Of course he can, and you need that. You obviously need that to have any sort of playoff success. But for him to be consistently, and we're talking about 2 games, so it's a small sample, but nevertheless, if he is your guy that is going to be your leading scorer, that's a problem. Jayson Tatum, obviously, he got poked in the eye by Kevin Durant. He left early last time around. Before that injury, he stunk in game 1. He sucked in game 2. He had 9 points on 3 of 12 shooting. Kemba Walker, as you said, indecisive. He has been bad. Evan Fournier has been bad, just across the board. I'm looking at it right now. Smart's averaging 18 points. Walker 16, Tatum 15 and a half, Fournier 13. How are they shooting? Well, Smart's up, 46%. Kemba 37, Tatum 28 on 16 tries per game. This is just what we are seeing right now. And I hope that Danny Ainge is not having this conversation internally, as has maybe been indicated, quite frankly, in some of the interviews he's done, including to Dan Shaughnessy not too long ago at the end of the regular season, or as the regular season was winding down, when he was saying, I'm not going anywhere. Brad Stevens is not going anywhere. The Jays are not going anywhere. Our best players are not going anywhere. Seem to indicate Marcus Smart's not going anywhere, highlighting how bad, how unlucky this year was with regard to COVID. Far and away, they were hit harder than any other team by COVID, by injuries, by the combination of those two. And now you're here in this Nets series against the title contending, favorite, courtesy of Bet Online and everybody else. The Nets are the championship favorite. So you're facing them. You're down an all-star in Jaylen Brown. You're getting basically the worst performances you possibly could out of your top 3 guys, excluding Brown, in Tatum and Walker and Fournier. It's like it's a perfect storm of disaster to where I am fearful that Danny is going to sit there and say, well, and I'm not talking about like end of the bench guys. I'm talking about core guys. That Danny is going to say, let's run it back because it couldn't possibly be worse than it just was.
Yeah. Well, I talked to somebody who would know, who said that ownership is just 100% behind Brad. They're not going to change course, and they love Danny. So you're not going to get any kind of change there. No, I think Danny knows he has to do something. And, how much do you believe the tease of Robert Williams? Can he stay healthy? If he's healthy, he's on his way to being Clint Capella. And that could be a big improvement for this team if these guys suddenly have someone there, but he has to be dependable. How much can you count on that?
I'm a believer in the talent. I'm a believer in the ability. It's hard to be a believer that he can stay on the floor. That being said, he's 23 years old. He's 23. Are we gonna write a guy off at 23 and just say he's made a class?
Are you going to write off Tatum?
Hard to do.
No. I mean, do you write it off Tatum?
Tatum for the most part has been durable. I mean, the only time he missed this year was COVID.
No, but I mean for 23, for some of the criticisms he gets.
Right.
Is this who he is?
Well, there aren't too many criticisms within his game, right? I mean, there are not too many things that people look at and say, boy, he's got to be exponentially better at this. At least the vocal minority, the loudest things you've heard about Jayson Tatum to the negative this year have been questions about leadership.
Right.
And at 23 years old, you're not supposed to be the leader of your team.
No,
you're not. And that's, maybe that sounds like I'm excusing it, but really that comes back to roster construction.
Well,
that's more of a Danny Ainge problem than it is a Jayson Tatum problem.
Not to play devil's advocate here, but some of the younger guys in the league that are doing really well are leaders of their teams, and it's like kind of obvious. I mean, the Luka show that we're getting, and Luka, I mean, we should need to put in a second category because Luka is just, he's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But he at 22 years old is the unquestioned leader of that team. John Morant with the Grizzlies is the unquestioned leader of that basketball team. And they're doing, and look, they're they're facing an uphill climb. They won the first game. No Donovan Mitchell probably helps that. But that's a team that has a young leader, and that's not a question. You have maybe Zion with the Pelicans. I think Zion probably takes that, but the narrative around basketball
Tatum leads by example.
What?
Do we question whether Tatum leads by example? Like he's never going to be a vocal scream at his teammate in the face, LeBron, all those, videos and memes and everything. Like he's not going to be that guy. He's just not built that way. He's not wired that way. I don't know. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. I just don't know enough about them on, I'm not watching them every day. I don't think Luka's that guy. I don't know if Morant is that guy. That's not me saying they aren't leaders of their team. It's just, are we expecting Tatum to be more than or just totally transform his personality just because he's the best player on the team?
No, the way he's going to go, I wrote a story earlier this week. I talked to Drew Hanlon, Tatum's trainer, and some people who knew Durant. And there's a very strong parallel between those two when Durant was his age. Durant used to get it for not closing out games, for being too passive, not demanding the ball enough. And basically at the same age Tatum is now. I mean, Tatum's advanced beyond that. But you have to think that he is going to get a lot better. I think he is. I don't think this is, what you see isn't what you get. I think that they just have to build around him, like you say. But they've got all the wings in the world. So what's the problem?
Just because they have wings, I mean, they're effective ones. I mean, they have different types of them. But, Tatum, and the thing about Tatum is like, okay, he gets compared to Kevin Durant and he gets compared, like the article this week about him getting compared to Carmelo Anthony, like that's supposed to be a bad thing. Like, I just don't.
Yeah, right.
Like, he is insanely talented. He is, I think, ahead of schedule in terms of development. He's doing a lot of, again, he's starting to really, try and become that playmaker instead of just being a scorer. And balancing that is, again, that's the final step for him, is balancing how to get his teammates involved versus when he needs to take over.
Right.
But what's happening, what you're seeing now is, Tatum is having a rough series because they're literally gearing up to stop him. That's because they don't have, I mean, if Fournier is not going to do it and Kemba's going to be indecisive, as Mark said, like what else do they don't have any other guns to go against this Brooklyn team that's fully loaded. So they're like, yeah, okay. Aaron Nesmith, go for it. Have a blast. Marcus Smart, shoot as much as your heart desires. Pick anybody. And it's just, again, built this roster construction, as we've talked about throughout the season, is not great. I mean, add Jaylen Brown, this is probably a little bit different. But they need help, and Tatum needs help in a couple different ways. And they just don't have the horses right now to keep up. But the one thing about this season, I am not like, okay, because Tatum's the best player, he deserves some criticism. But how much does he deserve, really? Not a whole ton, in my opinion, considering what he's played through, who he's played with. He's been, the leader in games played on the team, right? Yeah. He's played more games than anybody else. The lineup is constantly shifting around him. So the people that want to come out and say, oh, Tatum's not doing enough, I think you're crazy, considering what he's been able to do with the talent around him. Yeah. And it's just a matter of him, again, learning a little bit. Again, this series should be a very humbling series for him. Learning, watch how physical Durant gets with him. I mean, the first two games, that's the stuff. Like, you need to be able to come back with something, And Durant, look, Durant's one of the greatest scorers in the history of basketball. Right. But that's a guy that you need to model yourself after. Be a little more aggressive. Push some people around. Get called for a foul, an offensive foul. I don't care. At least it shows that you're being aggressive, right, Mark?
Or you make Durant really work for it. Maybe you get him into a little bit of foul trouble. And, that's one thing that's supposed to be a bigger part of Tatum's game, like you say. I mean, how many games ago was the 17 for 17 game from the line? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what he could be. But the other thing is, and this is a roster construction thing, I'm convinced they need a point guard. They need a real Mike Conley type point guard. I think Kemba would be great. You're going to have him next year. Bring him off the bench as a sixth man who can just go looking for buckets. That's his whole mission, just score. And get somebody in that playmaking role, because they talk about how they want ball handlers. Yeah, but you don't necessarily have great playmakers though. You have guys who can handle the ball, but yeah.
Going back to the Evan, you brought it up, the Jayson Tatum, Carmelo Anthony thing, and I didn't read the article. I didn't see it. I don't know if this
I
was
didn't
part
either.
of the premise or not, but where my head instantly goes when you bring up the comparison, like, sure, Carmelo Anthony and this coming from a Syracuse guy, like, he's a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
He's an exceptionally talented player. But the
Right.
stigma attached to Carmelo throughout his career, when he was the focal point for so many teams, not the case now in Portland, but Denver, New York, when he was the guy, it was, he isn't a leader, he's selfish, you can't win with this guy. So to that end, like, no, Jayson Tatum doesn't want to be Carmelo Anthony. If you want to say at the end of the day, they both have Hall of Fame careers and they're both guys that average between 25 and 30 points, more often than not.
Yeah.
Sure. But, I think the point probably is that you're looking for more from Jayson Tatum than what Carmelo Anthony gave his teams in
Right.
terms of some of those intangible things that,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to say Tatum can't bring you that. Again, 23 years old, but it's still remains to be seen in a lot of ways, Mark.
Yeah. But Jayson Tatum looked up to Carmelo Anthony. He actually spent a lot of time studying his game. So, and who's his god? Kobe. He worked out with Kobe. Some of the worst tendencies he's had this year have been in line with those two guys.
Right.
What they do. So maybe that's part of his game. You have to, and he still has to develop the playmaking part. I still think he slipped a little bit of his defense, but last year he was aspiring to be an all NBA defensive player too. But he's 23. I mean, where do you guys think he'll be when he's 27?
I think offensively he's going to be a pretty similar player. I guess the question would be, like you're talking about, from a playmaking standpoint, getting others involved, being more aggressive, getting routinely to the free throw line 10 times a game, all of that. We don't know. You hope, but I guess I wonder, for a lot of those all-time greats, how much of that is what they have around them versus the player themselves. Now, I think Tatum does have enough around him, even if you just want to look solely at Jaylen Brown and stop there. I think he has enough around him to play less ISO and trust his teammates to some degree, not maybe all the way around and depth, but certainly they could be more of a cohesive, connected 1-2 punch. Those two, I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot of isolated piling up statistics from Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and not nearly as enough connectedness and working together between those two, which you got them both under contract long term. Now we can get to the possibility of Jaylen Brown getting traded away this offseason, but so long as those two are the pillars, the guys to build around, that needs to adapt, that needs to change.
And I put that on Brad. It's the problems you've seen in these first two games. They're not cutting. They're not. Kemba said this the other day. We have to get open for Jayson. And they're not doing that. And part of that comes to cutting, game planning. I mean, you're the coach, you should be getting that message across.
How much of that is lack of just playing time together? It just feels like there's a chemistry issue here that nobody knows when to cut where, because they're not sure if this guy's cutting, if that guy's going to cut. They're not familiar with each other, right? Like Kemba was played half the season. He didn't play in back-to-backs. Fournier just got here. Robert Williams, love him to death. He's been, in and out of the lineup. Pritchard just got here. Neesmith just got here. I mean, it's again one of these things where this, and look, again, this does fall on Brad. There's no question about it. But it's like, I don't remember exactly the quote, but a couple weeks ago, you could hear Brad audibly on the broadcast, like, move, like, move.
Yeah, right.
So it's not like he's not coaching it. I think it's just like, they don't have the right chemistry. And unfortunately for them, look, the team on the other side of the floor doesn't have a lot of chemistry either. But they have Harden, Durant, and Kyrie. So does it matter? Like that's it's just one of these, like, man, like it's just you keep coming back to the same stuff all the time. It just, you're undermanned, undergunned, and everything is built up to this point to be against you.
Yeah, I think for me anyway, that goes back to needing a actual point guard, which is an off-season move, which Mike Conley's a free agent.
So is Lonzo, right? Isn't Lonzo a free agent?
Lonzo.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Mike Gorman on last week. He said the same thing. Who's the Celtics point guard right now? Is it only Peyton Pritchard? Is he the only point guard on the team?
Yeah, and he's hit a wall lately.
Right. Expected though.
Yeah. I mean,
sure. I'm surprised he got this far, but yeah.
Right. That's no slight on him, obviously, with the truncated schedule and rookie year and no traditional training camp and all of that.
Hi, guys. Cedric Maxwell here. I want to take a minute to tell you about Marigold Medical. I'm used to keeping my body in great shape, but with arthritis, even the most simple everyday tasks became unbearable. As soon as I called Marigold Medical, I knew I was in good hands. No drugs, no surgery, just an experienced team of caring professionals that wanted to get me back to doing the things I love. Make the call to Marigold Medical and get back to pain-free life.
Mark, you had mentioned quite a little while ago, Marcus Smart, the possibility of dealing him away. We've talked about that a number of times here on this show in recent weeks, as rumors have swirled, and also as we all play GM and try and figure out how to fix this thing. If you're not moving the Jays, you're not moving your Kemba Walker as much as you'd like to move him, might be unmovable or immovable as a result of what that contract is right now, unless you're willing to give up pieces so the teams will be willing to take on his salary. And that's another thing that we can get into. But I guess I just wonder with Marcus Smart, and I'm not nearly as resigned to, oh no, don't you dare trade away Marcus Smart the way that, maybe I've been in the past, because I recognize something has to happen. I guess I just question, what are you going to get from Marcus Smart that is going to be exponentially better than what you have? What is he going to bring you that is going to transform where we're at right now?
You could package him with your number one and your first rounder and move up somewhere. Yeah, that kind of thing. A sign and trade. There's possibilities. I mean, it depends on what they can go after for free agents. Do you go after Jared Allen? I mean, they will. I was talking to somebody recently who said that they pointed out that ownership has always been willing to spend into the tax if it's a player that's worth it. Well, maybe you have to start looking at free agency above all.
Well, is Evan Fournier going to be deemed worth it? Because they might have to pay into the tax to keep him.
I would love to see what he's like if he's with this team for a while. I mean, I love the way he plays. He gets it, the other night he was like the only guy in a rhythm for a while. But he's a guy who will help that chemistry.
And he's also a guy that seems like he, has a burning fire. Like he got in Durant's face the other day, which I was like, finally, somebody's just gonna. It seems like somebody's got a pulse. Yeah, he's got a pulse, which I like. But again, is Evan Fournier the guy that you spend you're going to the tax for? That's the question you have to answer. And the problem with Boston is their cap situation right now doesn't make the ability to be fluid very easy. Smart's contract is very tradable, which makes it attractive. The problem is he's usually a piece that contending teams want to add. not teams that are rebuilding. So if you're looking to move up, I'm not quite sure if the teams in that, with maybe save Golden State, who will have a nice draft pick, probably because Minnesota won too many games, and Minnesota has to send their pick to Golden State. There's a scenario where you're saying, okay, we can get and Golden State with Marcus Smart would just be fun with him and Draymond on the same team. But you could, there's an opportunity there to trade Marcus to a contender and get some real value back. But again, Smart's value is only valuable to a team that's in the middle of contention, not to a team like the Detroit Pistons. Who I'm not suggesting Detroit was going to trade their first round pick for Marcus Smart. I'm not doing that. But a team like Detroit, a team like Houston, a team like Toronto, those teams aren't looking for Marcus Smart. They're looking for maybe the draft a guy like Marcus, but not looking for Marcus right now.
Right. Team like the Clippers, who look like they're going to implode.
Again,
what a disaster.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I'll say. At least the Clippers are taking all the flack that Boston should be getting and just taking that attention, that national attention, and putting it on themselves. So thank you.
How happy is Doc Rivers right now too? Wasn't me.
Yeah.
Wasn't me, guys.
Really. The other thing they have, what do they have? 9 million of that trade exception left.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's a pretty good tool. But, it depends on, you taking on a player, someone who's trying to unload. I can't see Mike Conley not going back to Utah. Why would he want to leave there? Aside from the city itself. But.
Cedric Maxwell, who is part of the CLNS media network as well, I'm pretty sure that's what he's most famous for, had an interesting comment on television yesterday saying that he actually would trade Jaylen Brown if you could, not just for anybody, obviously, but if you could get, let's say, Karl Anthony Towns from Minnesota, or as we know, Bradley Beal has been brought up in the past. We know the relationship between Beal and Tatum. Some of those types of guys who could potentially be available that are all stars, that are Towns is still young, incredibly talented on the part of both. Beal, he's been a little banged up. Is that a move that you would make?
Yes, I would. If it got me Bradley Beal, absolutely. I mean, that guy's amazing. He's a scoring leader, and he would be a great balance for Tatum. Karl Anthony Towns, although there was one thing, the comeback game against Minnesota, one thing I noticed in that game, once he started shooting, he's kind of a selfish player.
I'm not into Karl Anthony Towns. I'm not. We have enough evidence. He's kind of a softer player. I know he's been through a lot. Don't get me wrong. He's been through as many tragedies as any of us been. Just in the past
Karl
year.
Anthony Towns on line one.
Yeah, right. Basically calling me to tell me I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
But you have a guy who, it seems to lack intensity at sometimes. This team has enough of those guys already. And name me a big playoff game Karl Anthony Towns has won.
No.
I know he hasn't been in the playoffs. His team's been terrible, but it's like, stuff changes as Boston's finding out. Like, defense is changing in the playoffs. Things get different. Things get tougher. So if you have a guy that backs away from, Cat is a wonderfully talented player. I'm not saying he's not, but at least with Brad Beal, I kind of know a guy that's going to give me everything he's got every single night. You never question whether Brad Beal leaves on the floor or not. You never walk away from a game being like, man, was Brad Beal into it tonight? Has anybody ever said that? I don't think so. But so in that particular capacity, I would be on board for that. Not on board for Karl Anthony Towns. Not with what Jaylen, I think, means both on and off the court to this team.
Yeah. And, if you need an opinion on Karl Anthony Towns, ask Jimmy Butler,
Ask KG.
Yeah. It's, but just maybe just a handful of instances, but I think Jaylen has to be considered for that.
So Bradley Beal would be one option, obviously, theoretically, just in the context of this show. Bradley Beal would be an option. Karl Anthony Towns, is he less of a preference simply because it might stifle the development of Robert Williams. And if you believe that he could be
Huh?
Clint Capella for a year or something like that, if you believe he can stay on the floor, be,
Yeah.
this team center of the future, are you less inclined to want to make a move for Cat?
Yeah. Although one free agency option I was wondering about would be Jared Allen. Would you go after a guy like that and play him with Williams?
Back to the double big lineup. Let's do it.
Yeah. But an effective double big.
Yeah, I
The
love
last
Jared
time we
Allen.
saw one of those in Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the kind of move that they need if they've already got these guys like Fournier and Smart, who are great complementary wing players? And then you have that defensive middle, because defense is as much part of their problem as anything else.
It's going to be a
Maybe
really
more
interesting offseason, obviously, for Danny.
Yeah, I don't know. It's what he does. I mean, again, you're getting a good front row seat of what you got to compete against. Jared Allen would definitely help as a rim deterrent, no question about that. And it's funny that why Houston was like, let's just get rid of Jared Allen for no reason at all whatsoever. In that James Harden haul, I didn't get it. I mean, look, they're going to get what they want. They're tanking and they're going to get a top pick. They might get Evan Mobley, who might be better than Jared Allen. But like Jared Allen is a very, very serviceable NBA player. And the fact that Brooklyn got rid of him, you get James Harden. I'm sure they didn't really want to do that. But they had to do that. Look, if you had the opportunity to get James Harden, then you're gonna do that. Imagine Philly with James Harden instead of Ben Simmons right now, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't think Philly gets enough crap for not trading for like James Harden or not trading for Kyle Lowry, which would clearly put them at a different level.
Right.
That's like Kyle Lowry would help so many teams currently that nobody traded for him, and I can't believe that nobody traded for Kyle Lowry. He's just one of those guys that impacts winning. It's like Chris Paul.
Right.
Wherever Chris Paul goes, they just win. It doesn't matter who the hell it is. So it's
in the regular season.
Well, yeah, but it's not. Chris Paul just keeps getting hurt, which sucks. I feel bad because he's amazing, man, and it's not even. He doesn't have to even score that much. He just has to be on the floor and again be a point guard, direct traffic,
makes decisions.
Again, figure out where. I mean, DeAndre Ayton is having a terrific season, and partly because Chris Paul has been like, you got to go. I'll get you the ball here. You need to do this, this, and this. Right. Mikal Bridges is having an amazing season.
Right.
And he's a great defensive player. I mean, an absolute nightmare on the defensive end. But guess what? He's having a great season, partly because Chris Paul's giving him the basketball. And then there's the whole Devin Booker thing, obviously, which makes life a lot easier. But Chris Paul transformed that team. And again, that's what having a steady point guard will do for you. And again, we go back to Boston. They don't know what to. It's too much. My turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. Not somebody dictating the action.
No flow. That's, and again, it's a player they don't really seem to have.
So let's spin it back to this series, not so much the series, but the extra stuff. The extra stuff, of course, it's kind of amazing we've gone this deep into the show without talking about it, but Kyrie Irving really threw out just a landmine in his game 2 post-game chat with the media, asked about what he is expecting in his return to Boston, which, hard to believe, but obviously the pandemic played a role in that. This is the first time that he will be in Boston as a visitor in front of fans and actually playing in the game. So asked, what are your expectations? And, there are a number of different ways he could have answered that question, but opted to really pinpoint the fans and say, well, hopefully there's no belligerence and subtle racism. And everybody knows about it. It happens in Boston, obviously, and which a lot of people have really reacted to in a polarizing way. Obviously, you hear Kendrick Perkins, who was a Celtic for a long time, and of course, is a popular voice around the league right now, saying that he, in his time as a player for Boston or against Boston as an opponent, never experienced any of that. Doesn't mean others haven't, obviously, but he never experienced it. But said with Kyrie Irving, it just feels like there's always a little bit extra. There's always trying to change the narrative. When you heard those remarks, Mark, what were your thoughts?
I thought it was, well, first of all, people have to accept the history of this city, and there is a history in this city of racism. Does it? It's the same as every other place in the country, as far as I'm concerned. But it, there's enough on videotape to know what Boston can be about at its worst times. But first thought I was the one who asked him the question back in 2019 about racism after the
DeMarcus
Boogie Cousins incident.
Mhm.
And at that point, Kyrie kind of said, I can't say that it's happened to me. It's just sad that it would happen. And now all of a sudden he knows. I mean, or he has he experienced it? Because back then he was saying no. He didn't really say he had experienced it the other night either, but he had Durant on the side sort of egging him on, saying, the whole world knows. And Kyrie said, yeah, the whole world knows.
Durant, who, by the way, was very interested in coming to Boston just a few years ago.
Yeah. It's, I wouldn't put it past Kyrie to take this approach, knowing he's already going to get destroyed by the crowd. He has a history of not liking to play in front of crowds that used to be his home crowd. So, he could be trying to flip the script a little bit that way.
Well, what's sad too, and I tweeted about this, there are just so many justifiable reasons for the crowd to eviscerate him.
Yes.
Come Friday and most especially Monday when it's a near full capacity attendance.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't realize, and we've always known since before he was a Celtic. This is not new.
Right.
We've always known he's wired differently. He operates on a different. I was going to say on a different level, but that would feel like I'm complimenting him, and I'm not. He just he thinks in a different way than most of us do, and I don't think for the better, quite frankly. But that's my opinion, having listened to him all these years. That it's like he doesn't understand that you pledged your allegiance to Boston, to the crowd, to season ticket holders, made a commercial, talked about having your number retired and forever in green and all of that. It's and then that quickly, equally as fast, turned your back and plotted with a friend to sign elsewhere. And you can do that. You can do all that.
Sure.
But you have to be willing to accept what comes with it, which is that you're going to get booed mercilessly. And that's not racism. I mean, they're obviously, if the wrong things are said, that is inexcusable, that is reprehensible. But short of that, if you were just booed and your character is attacked, that's justifiable. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, there's a little calculation at play there by him.
Oh, there's a lot of it, because now the return is less about his return and more about how the crowd is going to react to his return.
Exactly. And now, after the Westbrook thing last night, the league has made a code of conduct statement about crowds. So, there's going to be a lot of attention tomorrow night from that, just because of what's already happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's building into quite a hit. It's a national TV game. Be interesting to see what the national narrative is on this game.
Yeah, I want to thank Philly fans for just ruining it for everybody. That again, that quickly, it's unbelievable. Like that, we haven't had full stadiums, and in many places still don't, including Boston, obviously for right now. We haven't had full stadiums in more than a year, and this is what we need to do. This is how we need to celebrate it and treat athletes in your first trip back to the building. I don't get it. I don't get people, quite frankly.
Yeah. That's Philly,
Look how they treated Santa Claus.
Yeah. Batteries at the poor man.
That was the
presents.
That was the infamous Kyrie blah, blah, blah again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
no, that's sort of Philly. That can be Boston. You know,
Oh, no question, it could be
Yeah.
Boston. This depends on
Yeah.
who you are.
Right.
Run
No,
our
it's
bets.
again, it's not about the city, it's about people.
Yeah.
And a lot of people out there suck.
Yeah.
Correct.
And people have been cooped up and they're going to come out. I mean, it's happening on airplanes. It's happening everywhere. People are going to come out thinking they're very entitled and they're raring to go. Well, there's going to be a couple of people in the crowd who will probably unleash.
Well, look, I mean, it should go without saying, but if anybody out there who goes to the Garden, be it Friday or Sunday, and reacts a certain way that they shouldn't to Kyrie Irving, you
Right.
know, you are going to get what's coming to you. You will get banned from the
Yeah.
Garden. You will have your tickets revoked or season tickets revoked, or you know,
Yeah.
you won't be able to come to any events. Like it's
Right.
you need to determine one. I mean, if you are like the obvious, is it worth it? And two, more importantly, like, is that really what kind of person you are? Is
Right.
is that how you're wired? Is that how you're built? Is that how, like, would it even? It's just what's, and maybe this is on Kyrie, maybe this is me being naive, or more than likely it's that gray area in the middle. But I just I've been so looking forward to Kyrie coming back to Boston so that he can be booed.
Right. Right.
And get everything that he has coming to him in that regard, just getting booed.
Right.
It never for 1 second even occurred to me what he brought up the other night in terms of him coming back.
No. And you know, with the exception of his first game back in Cleveland, which was his Celtics debut, so he couldn't very well skip that one.
Right.
This will be the first time that he has played in front of a crowd that he used to play for. You know, he's avoided them. He avoided them in Cleveland. He's avoided it here. So it'd be interesting to see how he plays. I mean, because this is very much up in his head, obviously.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm sure he'll be great. and they'll go up 3-0 and get ready to close the deal.
Oh yeah, and then Durant will, you know, we beat Boston, we got him back, you know, that whole thing.
Yeah.
It's but it's you know, Kyrie is a different kind of dude.
Evan, any parting thoughts?
Basically, look, any criticism of Boston and their racist past is valid, although bringing it up at that point was a little something. But every fan in the building has a justifiable reason to boo Kyrie. So, I mean, you got to keep it civil, please. I feel weird I have to ask that. If you're going to the game, keep it civil, please. There's no need to go to certain levels. But Kyrie also bailed in this team and quit this team very clearly.
Yeah. And
he deserves to wear that. And his run from that and running from that he's constantly done has been kind of weird. But it won't matter because the Nets are going to win anyway, and they won't have to worry about this team anymore. And Boston will have to figure out what to do next season about handling Brooklyn. But all this stuff, I look, he said what he said, and again, valid stuff. But like, you know, you want to talk about racism in Boston, go talk to Bill Russell about it, and he'll be able to educate you on what is, you know, the deep rooted history of it. And he's been more vocal about it than anybody really, and what he's been able to do to shine a light on it and kind of grow. Like the thing with Kyrie is like his comments don't help anything, right? It doesn't bring the conversation. I mean, it happens. We need to turn the conversation, right? We need to see, there has to be ways to flip the narrative, so to speak. And Kyrie doing that doesn't help that. And there are people around that are trying to turn the narrative. I mean, you know, I don't know if you guys follow Dart Adams on Twitter, but he's been doing a lot of stuff like the history of certain boroughs of Boston and how certain genres of music have deep-seated roots in Boston and how, you know, blacks have been at the heart of those particular, you know, roots and culturally how Boston has a very rich black hair. Like there are certain, like he's doing a phenomenal job of trying to educate people the proper way. And what Kyrie just did, you know, kind of hurts that a little bit, in my opinion. But maybe I'm also maybe not the person that should be talking about it. So,
I just feel like, and look, we're almost out of time. So I want to say one very important thing. None of the three of us are truly qualified to talk about racism in Boston. So I want to make that abundantly clear to anyone out there. It's like, well, listen to these three white guys talking about racism in Boston. So there is that. But I also think some of these successes of Boston, and I'm talking about athletics, Bill Russell, first black coach in the NBA, obviously hired by Red Auerbach. Willie O'Ree, first African-American hockey player in the NHL.
Right.
We spend less time, not the royal we, not us. We spend less time talking about things like that than we do the all of the negatives, which should all be highlighted and not overlooked, like the Red Sox being the last team to integrate a black player,
Right.
and the Yankees in general, and other examples. Like I feel like there are probably countless examples on both sides, but for whatever reason, kind of going back to what you first brought up, Mark, at the very beginning, that it's Boston gets highlighted more negatively than it seems any other city. And I can't speak to whether that's right or wrong in my own personal experience, obviously, but it feels like we gravitate to it more than we do any of the positives and celebrating the positives.
Right. And I think some people are comfortable with this idea of Boston being the boogeyman, but just thinking back, I was in school during busing. I was going to school up here. I knew some people in Southie. I mean, there are, part of it is we earned it. I mean, there have been some bad moments in this city, and Theodore Landsmark, I'll never forget when that happened. Black man gets assaulted with an American flag. It was a Herald photographer who took the picture, who won the Pulitzer Prize for it. But it's there, and I think it lives on, and it's very strong in the Black community.
Well, it's interesting, and an ongoing discussion, important discussion, and one obviously a lot of people weren't expecting to be having this week, but we'll see what comes of the crowd response come Friday and Sunday at the Garden. Hopefully, we have nothing to talk about on that end. That there's not going to be any reason to have a boy, wasn't the crowd great conversation. It's the only reason to have a conversation about it after the fact is if something goes poorly. So hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully there's no vindicating Kyrie Irving, for lack of a better term.
Feel free. He should, like you said, the crowd should boo him. Think they have every right in the world to boo him, but let's not turn into Philly. How's that?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, but
well, 2, maybe 3 games left in the Celtics season. Then we get into what is, at least in years past, kind of the more interesting shows, quite frankly. And as the offseason programs and how to rebuild this club and what changes need to be made to take them to that next level, because they have now been lapped by the Nets, who at one point were the laughing stock of the NBA for making that trade with Boston. And here we are. So for Evan Valenti, Mark Murphy, I'm Adam Kaufman. Mark, thanks as always for hopping on with us, and we'll do it again.
All right.
Folks, we'll talk to you again next week.